Thank you so much for joining us today for the Pastor's Potluck podcast. Here on the Pastor's Potluck, it's similar to a normal potluck where you might get something that you want and there may be something that you just want to pass up altogether. And that's okay. There's something here for everybody. Our goal here is to encourage you and maybe in the process entertain you. If you're ready, let's dig in. Well, welcome to another episode of the Pastor's Potluck podcast. I almost said challenge.
Sometimes that's what it feels like.
The Pastor's Potluck challenge.
It's like a hot dog eating contest or something.
For real. Like, where did that come from? No, but anyways, we're joined today by Pastor Anna. And one of the things actually that I've had a couple people approach me about is they kind of like, okay, we've been doing this for a little bit over a year now and come up with, I think we're on 60 or 61 episodes or something like that, and get asked a couple times, how do we come up with topics and how do we generate these ideas for all of our different episodes? And one of the things that we do is every single Monday, we have various meetings, but one of those is towards the end of our service planning meeting whenever we discuss and fine tune a lot of our stuff for Sundays and talk about ideas for sermon series and whatnot, and all the good stuff that happens that we talk about our podcast. We talk about church podcast, which is like the sermon from Sunday. Then we talk about our Extra Point podcast, which is a follow-up from Sunday's sermon. And then we talk about the Pastor's Potluck podcast, since pretty much everybody on staff here is a reoccurring guest, and we talk about ideas and things to come up with. And so whenever it came back around to Pastor Anna's turn, I was like, hey, what do you want to talk about? And she was like, I almost have an almost idea.
Yes.
But it was this theme of almost, like the things in life that we can possibly almost miss out on. But I'll let you talk a little bit more about that and this idea and what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So I actually sent you a message really late, like Saturday night or Friday night or something. I was driving home from Thanksgiving, listening to podcasts. Some of my favorite ones. One of my favorites is a podcast with Heather Thompson Day. She's with Christianity Today. She's a university teacher, professor, and she has this podcast called Viral Jesus, and I really love it. Lately, they've been doing a lot of episodes on healing and spiritual healing and just like how to move forward after you've experienced any kind of hurt or just setbacks. And so I'm listening, and all of a sudden, she had a guest on that shared a little bit about things that almost happened. Mm-hmm. And they started saying, the first time I remember thinking, oh, well, that almost worked out for me. I was young. And I thought to myself, like, I remember having that feeling. Like, I remember, and I had shared with you, whenever I was in 5th grade, I was never the smartest kiddo in the class, but I was good enough. I was average. I got good grades. And one year I tied to make it to math day, which was like this big smart kid thing. Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go to math day, which my sister went to every year. My little sister, she was at math day. And I was like, for once, I'm going to be the one. Yeah. And so me and this other kid, we had to take a tiebreaker math quiz, and he got a higher score than I did. And I remember thinking, well, I almost did that. Like, I almost went to math day. Yeah. And kind of like it was a crushing feeling. And as they were talking, they said, what about the almost that turned things around too? Like, when I almost married that person I knew wasn't going to be the future that God wanted for me. Yeah. What about the almost job opportunity I took that could have landed me in a bad way? And so there are definitely blessings in the almost. So that was kind of like the idea behind it. I thought it would be neat if you and I shared some almost things. Yeah. Both the good side and the bad side, things that we saw as maybe a hindrance, a setback. But then in retrospect, we saw where it was a blessing.
Yeah.
And one of the verses that they pulled up, which I thought was really powerful, Heather Thompson Day shared from Exodus 23. She was talking about how God was providing the promised land. And God is God. And he could have said, hey, you guys are just going to take this whole thing over. In one fail swoop, as our friend Megan likes to say. That's her favorite phrase. Shout out Megan Beha. But he could have done that, but he didn't. Like, God didn't do it that way because that's not necessarily the realistic way that things happen.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening is he says, I'm not going to drive out these people in a single year because the land would become desolate with wild animals and they would be a threat to you. And then he says in Exodus 23, verse 30, I'm going to drive them out little by little until your population is increased enough to take possession. And I love that that she shared that verse because that is the kind of God, like in these almost moments.
Yeah.
God is going to prepare for us, but he's also going to ask us to do something too. And there's just so much hope in that. Like for people who have a relationship with Christ and they trust God, there's a lot of hope in saying, I want all this to happen by tomorrow.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, I know that God knows why.
Yeah.
There's just something cool about that. So what are some almost things that you can think of in your life?
I almost spent a long time in jail.
That's real life.
So whenever I was right out of high school, I moved into a house with like 5 or 6 buddies. It was a total of 6 of us, so 5 and then myself. And obviously, you know, with young guys, we're just partying and having a good time. And what we think is, you know, we're just getting into nonsense, just dumb stuff. And then I would in the garage, I would practice graffiti, right? And the reason that I would practice is because I would go out to different parts of the city and go and spray paint and put up my artwork all over the city. Well, one night, the guys that I was living with, they were up late and they were partying. I had to work the next day or go to school, one of the two. I think it was go to school. And I was like, I'm just not going to do this. I need to go to bed. But what they ended up doing is they ended up taking like one of the guys' Suburbans that was like on the same wavelength as I. Like I have to wake up and go to work, I think is what it was. They took his Suburban and they started driving around and they found a motorcycle that was a plant, but they didn't know that. They were like, okay, let's go steal this motorcycle. Yeah. And so they bring it back to the house. They start taking it apart to try to grind off VIN numbers and everything else like that. Yeah. That following weekend, we have a big old party at the house, and there's a whole bunch of people over, and they thought it was a bright idea to show everybody this motorcycle that we have.
Oh no!
And so, like a week after that, like while I was at school, I get a phone call from my mom, and she was like, "Hey, you need to come over to the house. Like, just don't worry about school today." And I'm like, "What in the world?" I'm thinking, Dad's got cancer.
Yeah, someone's died.
Somebody's died. Like something really catastrophic. And so I go over to my parents' house, and there's like 6 cop cars out front. I'm like, who got murdered? Yeah. Like, that's what I'm thinking.
Right.
Like, and so I walk in there, and there's all these cops, and my mom's just got her hands over her eyes. Then I look around. My dad comes walking out of the kitchen. I was like, okay, Mom and Dad are good. Like, this is good. And they're like, sit down, Jared. I'm like, what in the world's going on? By this time, like my phone from my friends are starting to call me, and I'm like, but I'm trying to put all these pieces together. And so these cops, they're there, and they're like, so there was an incident at the house that you're living at. I'm like, what in the world is going on? They're like, somebody from that party had told the cops that there was a stolen motorcycle at the house. And so they were like, well, we were in there and we started, retrieving the motorcycle. And so we looked inside the garage where the motorcycle was.
Oh, snap.
And there's all my artwork that I'd been practicing. Because I would try something new,
right.
and then I'd paint over it and then try something new. And
Right.
then once I got it worked out, I'd go out. And, if I can get it up in like 30 seconds or whatever, then I knew that I was good to go do it. Okay. So my artwork in the garage, and they were like, so who's the artist? And they were all, oh, his name's Jared. His name's Jared.
Forget the motorcycle.
Yeah, they ratted me out. They were like, if we could try to put the blame on anybody. But anyway, so come to find out, the amount of artwork that I had done, they measure graffiti by square footage, right? Mm-hmm. And so if it's over a certain square footage, then it goes from misdemeanors, all the way up to felonies, and all the different numbers that are associated with those. And the amount of square footage that I had spray painted all over the city would have put me in jail for 2 years for graffiti.
Wow, yeah.
Nothing violent, anything like that. Which, that's the law. It is what it is.
Yep.
But come to find out that the detective that was assigned to the lead on the motorcycle, whenever they got the tip, was somebody that knew my family. Mm-hmm. And I think, actually, no. The lady, she was a female detective. She went to the church that my parents went to. Mm-hmm. And so she looked at me and she's like, you've put me in like a terrible position. Oh, yeah. But what I want you to do is I want you to go and paint over everything that you've ever spray painted. And I ended up doing that. I ended up driving around San Antonio, a city of 1.5 million people. So you can imagine how big it is. You've been there multiple times.
Yeah.
And painting all over all this stuff. And so I almost went to jail. for felony.
Well, I think that story is pretty incredible because that almost happened, but the other connections, in those moments of almost, this is what impacted me as I was thinking through this too, is God has other plans sometimes. And I think that's pretty cool. I thought of even way back, a couple that I thought of was even in school, whenever I was in high school, I played softball growing up. Played little league ball, all this, and then I almost made the team. Yeah. I got cut 3 years in a row. There's not too many kiddos that try out 3 times. I really loved the sport. I really did, and so I was like, I don't want to just play the rec league. I want to get on the school team. I want to play on the school team. Yeah. And I didn't make the cut, and it really was crushing. But as I look back, because I almost made the team, it gave me, but I didn't. I was able to play kind of for fun with the rec league, but also I had the availability to say yes to some other things that I wouldn't have been able to do. Yeah. And there was just with many things, there was just some dramas that went down during the season that I was there. And I can remember being like, I'm actually really glad I'm not on the team because that would give me the belly gurgles. Yeah. Dealing with all that drama. And so I almost
feel
made
a little
the team,
acid reflux coming on.
Goodness. And the other time that I thought was whenever I almost stayed in positions, not just work positions, but relationships, or stayed where I was comfortable when I knew God was calling me to go. And maybe some people can relate to that in their own life, where, I can stay here because I know what it looks like, but it reminds me of what God is speaking to his people in the Old Testament. Look, you're going to go there, but I'm going to make a way little by little. And there was probably moments where they were tempted to stay. We see that where they're just ready to settle and to just do what everyone else is doing. And I have felt that so real in my life and so many times, just tempted to stay and settle. And one of
because it's comfortable.
Yes. And even whenever I almost got I almost landed a job at a high school. Whenever I just got out of school, I have a degree in art education. Yeah. And I interviewed for this job. in my opinion, and in the opinion of others who spoke to me about it, I was a shoe-in position. There was no reason that I shouldn't have gotten the position outside of just some other connections that other people had, whatever. And I was really hurt. Like whenever I got that job, or when I didn't get it, I was really, really hurt. And I felt really bitter. And of course, I was polite and kind because, you know, I still know that I should do those things. Yeah. But on the inside, it was a really big hit. And as I looked back on that, just like these other things, like I'm like, oh my goodness, I probably wouldn't have left that job when a ministry opportunity came to me, because it was a better job. Like it was a better position. But the job that I ended up landing after that was a job that I was like, you know what, this isn't my dream job. I'm okay giving a shot to something else. And I've seen really cool moments come from that. God has really just changed so many things in a positive direction with this just a little bit at a time. And I don't know, man, like it's just cool to see those almost moments that seem like a bummer come out on the other side.
Yeah. Now, was there ever a time that you, like, did you ever have like any kind of like almost near death experiences, like almost dying?
I want to say that I've probably had a couple in vehicles because I've been driving since I was like 16 and I love to drive and I don't go very slow. But I've learned to, you know, reel it in. But one that kind of comes to mind, I was on a trip. I have asthma, but it's allergy induced typically. And I haven't had asthma attacks or instances for like decades. And I was on a trip. I didn't have an inhaler with me. We were hiking in the Rocky Mountains, and something just came over me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm having an asthma attack. Yeah. And I thought, I don't have an inhaler here. We are hours from a hospital. Yeah. Like, this is gonna, I might just die here. Like, I'm gonna, and for anyone who has had an asthma attack, the difficulty to breathe is life-threatening, but then the mental game is even pushing it tighter. Oh, like the mental game of like, this is happening and there's nothing I can do about it. That's a really difficult fight to get into. But I remember just sitting down on a rock near me and I just started praying. I was like, God, like, I need your breath. Like, I need air from you. Like, I need my lungs to breathe. I need my airways to open up. Like, and just like breathing, trying to take the deepest breaths I can, which were not that deep because I was having an asthma attack. Yeah. But just really focusing on the Lord and asking for his help in that moment. There was one other person nearby, and I told them with like my little bit of voice that I had between breaths, I was like, don't leave, but please don't look. Because them looking on to me caused me to feel even more anxious feelings of like, I don't want someone to watch me die. Like, I don't want them to see it happen. Like, if you're going to watch from behind a bush over there or something. And within a few moments, I was able to start taking deeper breaths and deeper. And that particular moment, we were hiking to a waterfall, which wasn't a necessity. It was just for fun. And I did get my breath back, you know, praise the Lord. And I was like, God, I almost died just now. Yeah. And I just walked back to camp and enjoyed the rest of the day, talking to others and just celebrating not being dead. But yeah, like,
aren't you glad you didn't have to carry me off this mountain?
Jeez, no joke. Like, they would have just, you know what, the people I was with, if they ever hear this, I know them, they would have just left my corpse for the bears. Like, no, probably not. They're really super awesome, but it was spooky. But yeah, those moments, I'm sure like everyone has almost death moments. You?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. All my stories, I feel, are just like to the exact extreme. Like, there's nothing almost calm about my stories. I feel like anytime I share anything about my life or my past, it's like, wow, Jared just went to 10 really fast.
Hey, you know what? Someone's got to do it.
Yeah, I almost died from a drug overdose on several different occasions. I remember just this audible voice in my head saying, "Hey, if you do another line of coke, or you do more of this, you're gonna die."
Wow.
And just having those panic moments, like having some kind of semblance of like what eternity is like, even though I wasn't a Christ follower. Like, I grew up in church, and I'm like, wow, I'm about to spend eternity without Jesus. And
wow.
yeah, but I remember a couple times to where full blown like panic set in, and so like whenever you're doing things that are considered uppers, which are like very high energy drugs, your heart rate is always elevated. You're typically a lot warmer than usual, just because it feels like you've been running a marathon all day.
Yeah.
And I remember putting my head, I was in a party in this ginormous, like crazy house, but there's probably like 100 people there. And I'm like, where's your fridge? And they were like, just over there. And so I opened up the freezer and put my head in it just to try to cool myself off, that I'm thinking it was like the only logical thing that I could do. And it come to find out that during these moments that I remember audibly hearing this in my head, don't do this, you're gonna die. And that was like 3 separate times. But there was moments that the Holy Spirit had nudged my mom in the middle of the night to just get up and start praying for me.
Wow.
And there's no way to kind of go back and put those times to those dates.
Yeah.
Whenever she did it, but I know that the times that she was obedient to the Holy Spirit, like, I'm still alive today because of that. Yeah. And so I'm glad that my mom didn't almost go back to sleep.
Yes.
Because I'd have been in the eternal sleep.
Yep.
Crazy, right?
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. And those like almost like dangerous situations, like moments where you're just like, it does like kind of like snap you into some reality. Like we watched Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and you'll see it's of course like a comedy police show, but you'll see moments where someone gets in trouble with the law, like they're almost going to jail, and suddenly now they want to like, I want to make sure I'm doing the right things. I want to, like, literally, even like myself, like I was following Christ whenever I had my moment in the mountains, but I still was like, God, I want to spend the rest of today worshiping you. Yeah. Like, because, oh my goodness, like we just had a really close moment, you and I. Yeah. It's like you and me, God, like
really close. We were about to be face to face.
Yes, super duper close. And so it's just interesting, like, and I wonder if God almost lets those things happen to draw us in. Yeah. I don't necessarily know exactly, but we see some moments like that in Scripture where people get put to the limit, and at the line is where they have a moment with God. So
yeah, for sure. Like whenever you see like the story of like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they're like, dude, like all you got to do is like not worship God, and then just worship this statue, and you'll almost not die. But if you continue to worship your God, we're gonna throw you in this big old fiery furnace. Yeah. And they just stood their ground in what they believed in. And obviously we know the end of that story is that there was the appearance of
almost died.
Yeah, they almost died, and there was the appearance of a fourth person that was in the fire protecting them from doing those things. Have you ever had a moment in ministry to where you were like, man, I almost missed out on like this blessing, or just like witnessing this story just because like I let my attitude or I let something else get in the way of missing out on something that God has provided for you, or maybe like opened up a window for you to be, just to see something happening?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I was involved with ministry before I was full-time working with Southridge Church, and I think of moments like that, like moments where I was helping a local youth ministry, leading there, helping it grow, like doing things like that. And I really, there was a lot of guilt in leaving. There was a lot of guilt in saying, God, is this what you really want? Because I feel like things are going in a good way here.
Yeah.
But then like saying yes to those opportunities that I almost said no to, that has been just really cool. And even, I think even in relationships, like with volunteers, like I almost say no to parents being volunteers. Like that's just a personal preference, because sometimes parents tend to get really personal. Like I know, because my mom was a volunteer growing up, and I'd be like, Mom, like you're not treating anybody else like this. Like you're only treating me like this, or you're only getting angry whenever I get treated that way. Like everyone else is being treated the same, and you're getting mad because it's me. And the last 5 years, I can think of at least 4 or 5 parent volunteers that I've had that have been a huge blessing. And I almost said no to those things.
Yeah.
Because I thought, I don't want to mess with that, like that relationship complexities that are within that. And I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't. Like I would have missed out on huge blessings and influence on kids' lives that wouldn't have been available had I said, no, we just don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I almost missed out coming to West Virginia, just because of some of the past church hurt and just a lot of confusion and just heartache and frustration. I was like sick because I was just so full of anxiety and worry. Like I had lost like 30 pounds, which is, if anybody can not afford to lose weight, it would be me. Just because we don't need a search and rescue party. I feel like it would be like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Like we need to get like the magnifying glass and go look for Jared. But you'd be able to find me because I've got a good nose, the profile. So this beak that the Lord has blessed.
We almost missed him.
Yeah, we almost missed him, but thank God we could see that big honker on his face. But no, I mean, but allowing God just to say, "Do you trust me?" Whenever I was praying and seeking, because, I mean, so this was November of 2019 was the last place that I worked before here. And so we all know the beginning of 2020 looked like with the pandemic and everything shutting down. And so there was a lot of time to where I was super grateful just to be able to hang out with my family and not miss things. Because I was required to do, I wasn't allowed to have my personal days to go do whatever,
right?
Family related or however that looked. But I was grateful to be able to do those things, to take my kids to school, pick them up after school, work a little odds and ends job to where there wasn't like a whole lot to make me stress mentally.
Yeah.
Not that ministry does that, but it's a lot to take on, and you need to be super, super taking care of yourself. And I just wasn't in the right mental capacity to be in ministry during that time. But just praying about it, and I pretty much gave God an ultimatum, and I was like, which is stupid. Don't ever do that.
Yeah, right.
But I was like, if this is something that you want us to do, like you've got to make it blatantly obvious. And you gotta, we want to see this, and we want to see these things happen. We want to see this for, everything from childcare all the way up to what I was getting paid. And he, it's just God, like what God wanted. And what he wanted for me and my family was to be able to trust him and say, look, I've got you. Like, I'm sorry that all this other stuff has happened in the past, and through that, even, I wouldn't say it was like an immediate healing, but through this process, there's been a lot of areas of my life, in terms of that have been healed because of saying yes and not almost missing out on what could have been.
Yeah.
Because I think I was at a point to where I probably would have carried that around for a long time.
Yeah.
And there's still some things that I continue to work through, but I know that God is taking care of it and allowing that healing process to happen. I know that He's growing me as a leader. I know that He's growing me as a worship pastor, as a husband and father, a coworker, and because of saying yes to what God wanted, like I've grown closer to Him.
Yeah.
Ultimately, in everything that I do, and I believe that now more than any other time in my life, that my life has been more a reflection of not only the things that He saved me from, the drugs and the alcohol, obviously, with all those different lifestyles, my marriage was in shambles. He saved me from going through a divorce and all those other things. And now I have 2 more kids, a total of 3. And it's just now because of saying yes, and I'm grateful for what God has done before West Virginia, but I'm like also equally grateful for what has happened because now I am in West Virginia.
Yeah.
And
I think that
and I get somebody to make fun of because he don't like vegetables, Scott.
That's right.
I almost missed out on the thing that gives me the most pleasure in life.
That's amazing. I think that, so I do agree that giving God ultimatum probably isn't the best, but I think that you might have been in a place where there was a lot of doubt that allowed to settle in.
Yeah.
And this is just my opinion on this. I think that a faith without some doubt isn't actually faith, because our uncertainty, it actually draws us nearer to God. Like when we find ourselves uncertain of the future, curious about what's to come, even doubting, but when we take those things to God, not from Him, and that's the trick with any kind of doubt or circumstances like that, uncertainties, we have a choice in those moments. I can take my uncertainties and run, or I can take them. It's like having a bunch of money show up, and you're like, you can either take this money and run, like the price is right, or you can invest it back with whatever and, maybe get something more out of it.
Yeah.
And it's like taking our uncertainties and our doubts and keeping them to ourselves and taking, that's probably going to naturally pull us away from God. But if we take our uncertainties and doubts and say, God, here's what I've got to give you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's going to have to be you.
Yeah.
That's what faith is.
Yeah.
Faith is leaving that up to God and saying, I don't know how this is going to work out. I almost don't even believe it. But if you're God, you can do it.
Yep.
And I'm going to trust you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just so huge. I love that you guys had that experience, because those are moments to build faith. And we all have the opportunity in those moments to almost walk away and almost give up.
Yeah.
And if we have any listeners or people who are still hanging in with us, if you are at a point where you're almost about to give up, don't. Keep going. This is we know a God who sees us in all of those moments, and He will be there for the next step, no matter how big or small it is. Do not give up. When you almost feel like doing it, don't, because He's there. And He's real, and He does what only He can do. I appreciate these stories, because for me, I do have faith, but these stories increase that. It's just like pumping it up, man.
I know. Kind of like those. Remember those old Reebok shoes? The pumps?
with the tongue pump.
Yeah. Make
That's
it more
it.
comfortable.
That's what it is. Or squeeze the lifeblood out of your feet. 2 options. You're either more comfortable, or you have to go get 4 toes removed after school.
Yeah, I know.
It's this is where we're at.
Are we almost going to have a casserole appearance today?
Oh, it's happening. Okay, so welcome to the segment of the Pastor's Potluck where myself, Nana, brings a casserole. And today's casserole is Nana's casserole almost happened. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some things that almost didn't happen in human history, but they did. Thank the Lord. Okay.
Yeah.
So this first item is from, let me see if I can get this. What?
I just replayed the rest of that video, and I almost said what like the rest of the video says. I was like, this is not good for the potluck.
This is just, I don't know.
Yeah. I've been delivered.
Anywho, so the first two items I'm going to mention are from the New York Times. So this is real. I'm not just making stuff up. I almost thought about making just stuff up and being like, what do we think?
Yeah, guess what?
You guys think this is real? Or?
Yeah.
Anyway, the first thing that was almost not invented and almost didn't become a thing for us was bicycles. A German inventor credited with the invention. It actually started off with a couple different names. They were human-powered vehicles called Swift Makers, Swift Walkers, Velocipede, Lauf Machine, Drastine, among other titles. The first velocipedes had no pedals, but they were powered by running and then pushing, similar to a scooter.
Yeah, but you sat down, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it was like a pedalless. It's like them little tiny kids, like the
what
toddler.
are those called? Balance bikes or
velocipede or whatever it is.
A Lauf machine. Lauf machine. Anyway, many people considered a bicycle to be a novelty, and hobbyists would just indulge in them for fun. But the novel idea, of course, thought to be just a fad and a nuisance, became a main source of travel for many people in cities and urban areas.
I wish that bicycles didn't have pedals and people still use their feet just to get around, just so I could have a good laugh.
Like Flintstone style.
For real.
So
Could you imagine if you lived in a city where like most people like use bicycles to get around and then they
just like stomped around, like stomping everywhere.
It's like raining outside and they're just like spinning in circles.
Oh, that'd be terrible. Well, imagine if you didn't grow up and riding a bicycle wasn't a part of your childhood. You know what I mean? Like not everybody learns how to ride a bike, and that's okay. But if this didn't exist, I wouldn't have really fond memories of my sister smashing into the side of my dad's pickup truck. I mean, trying to learn. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah.
The next article mentioned was I'm still thinking about ways to travel through a city. Computer animated films. Many animated films are completely computer generated now. We all know this. But from beginning to end, these films used to not really think that they had a chance. Like they were totally considered as like not functional technology to use. Animators that had been dabbling with computer illustration since the 40s were given opportunities to do some short films, and in the 60s there were some animation pioneers such as Bell Laboratories, Ivan Sutherland, Lee Harrison, IBM, just to name a few, and they advanced the opportunities for computer animation in film and, of course, now the video game industry. Mm-hmm. The very first full-length feature film was still decades away from that point, and it wasn't until John Lasseter, thank you, and how he had a little bit of history with Walt Disney. It wasn't until he and Steve Jobs joined forces to found Pixar that the very first short film, Tin Toy, won an Academy Award in Best Animated Short, shortly to be followed by Toy Story once Disney decided to take on Pixar, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah, it took them years to make Toy Story, and it was so rudimentary. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Lasseter, rudimentary.
We're getting there.
Whatever.
Folks.
Yeah. We almost about to kill ourselves.
We almost said things the right way. And we were almost there. So
yeah, we almost made it. I don't even know. It just took them so long, and because of the amount of money that they were spending on paying these people to do this, it almost didn't happen. Yeah, and just
almost didn't happen.
Yeah, technology was just so it wasn't as advanced as they thought it was, so it was taking extremely longer.
I don't know what we would do without the little animated film. Everything's animated now. Oh yeah. everything from video games.
Well, there's
to
special effects and
to,
everything.
Yes,
So,
all of it.
Yeah.
It was a big deal. We almost didn't have that. We almost had to watch Godzilla like the 1920s version all over again.
Styrofoam buildings.
Oh my gosh. So one of the next is a toy that you may have heard of. It is the Slinky. I got this from a website that has blogs about different things that were invented. Richard James invented the Slinky. He was a naval engineer and known by locals as being a clumsy person. Oh, fun fact. After he had dropped a tension spring and observed how it moved on the floor, he had the idea for a Slinky. He released the toy in 1945, and his first batch of 400 Slinkies was sold in just 90 minutes.
Wow.
As of now, the Slinky has earned James $250 million.
That's insane.
That almost didn't happen.
That's insane.
You're welcome.
Dude, I want to drop something randomly on the floor and be like, oh, I should make a toy out of that. And ride off to the sunset with like my bags of cash on the back of my horse and like money's flying out of the bag, you know?
You just never know.
Looking like a bank robber.
Yeah, that's where it's like, man, if you have an idea, if you feel like you're set on something, why not try? Like, one of the things that ended up landing me in Charleston, West Virginia is because I was reading a book. So this is a note to people who read books, look out. And the writer wrote, you already know what yes looks like. You're in it. Like, you already know what no looks like. You're living in it. You don't know what yes looks like yet.
Yeah.
It's like, if you say no to this opportunity, you say no to this invention, you say no to this whatever, like, you already know what that looks like. It looks like tomorrow. It looks like your plans for the weekend. It looks like what you are already doing with your life. Where if you say yes to something different, or yes to a challenge, or yes to like, you don't know what that could be. Like, yeah. I don't know. Anyway, so that's how I ended up where I am in life. If that inspired you, go for it. Yes. The last thing that I pulled was something that almost didn't happen is the World Wide Web. Now this paragraph came from PC Mag, and they said it's virtually impossible to think of life on Earth without the internet. We've become so accustomed to living inside this incredible network of data that it is just second nature. Literally, if you are even listening to this podcast, just know, like, this is a spawn of the internet. Back in 1995, when dial-up providers ruled the industry and wide web surfing as a niche hobby, author Clifford Stroll didn't seem too out of line when he published Silicon Snake Oil, a book that had dire predictions of the network. In its pages, Stroll predicted that e-commerce would never succeed, among other ridiculous assertions. Now, he wasn't just the lonely crank about it either. Plenty of people saw the web as a passing fad and not something that would actually have the power to reshape our society. And here we are, reshaping.
I know.
Totally reshaping.
Yeah, we almost wouldn't have this podcast.
A lot of things. Yeah. Yes. So those are some things that almost didn't happen. Nana's casserole almost didn't happen. Just kidding. It totally was planned. But we will see you next time for the next segment of Nana's casserole on the Potluck. Thank you.
Time for our mystery meat.
Boom.
Scott wishes that this almost doesn't happen every single episode. But yeah, get in there. All right. Mystery meat question. What this is a whole bunch of random, for those of you who may just be tuning in for the first time this week, whole bunch of random questions get put in the jar. I need to redo my label, by the way, for this. It's all kind of like curling on the ends, but
it's just aging like a fine wine. It's getting better.
Yeah.
Or not.
Yeah. But so it's just like the mystery meat at a potluck. You just don't know what it is. You scoop a little bit, put it on your plate, and either you like it and either you don't, but that's all right. Here is the mystery meat question for this week. If you are given the chance to have a controller that has the power to rewind or fast forward, which one do you press?
Controller to rewind or fast forward. Which do I press? This is just me thinking through my personal thoughts. I would hit rewind. I don't have, like, even the bad situations in life, I've seen, like we literally just talked about, I've seen them turn around, and I know that God can use that stuff for good. So I'd hit rewind and try again on a couple things. Moving forward makes
like
me,
my lottery numbers.
Yeah. Moving forward, like not losing your actual remote, right?
Yeah.
When you first opened that card and you said remote control, I was like, this is personal.
Dude, my dog just chewed. So I was telling Anna, my dog just chewed my stinking TV remote, and I'm so mad at my dog. Oh. My dog almost died.
Jeez. Yeah, I'd probably hit rewind.
Yeah, I would too. I'd hate to press fast forward, and then you're like,
I don't want to miss anything.
I don't want to miss anything, but also like, say if it's like for a set amount of time, say like it's like a year from now, or maybe you can go back a year or go forward a year. If I go forward a year, even if I still had the memories of everything that was happening, obviously there would be some people that were no longer around anymore. Yeah. And I would hate to, I don't know, just the fact of losing. I'm tired of losing friends and family members and stuff like that. So I just don't want it to be all gloomy. I'd rather just go back and relive some of those moments.
Yeah. If we've learned anything from Adam Sandler and Click, it's that when you go forward, you miss out on things that you actually care about. Yeah. Thank you, Adam Sandler.
Yeah. That's where that question came from, by the way. I did that one. Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah. I just got done watching it, and I was like, oh, this would be a good mystery movie.
It's such a good movie.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
I think all of his movies are like really good.
Yeah. They have a good moral of the story kind of ending.
Yeah.
It's like moral of the story, love your family.
Yeah,
moral of the story, take care of yourself.
Yeah, except for little Nicky. Moral of the story, don't be Satan's kid.
Yeah, moral of the story, you find out your dad's the devil. You might want to do something about that.
Well, I enjoyed this one. It was a good episode. Thank you so much for having this idea and sharing it. And I hope that everyone that has listened today has just been encouraged just to kind of give everything just that little bit more effort, and allowing God to move in your life, and allowing your faith to grow and allowing your trust to grow. And then also that means that you're allowing God to do something amazing and incredible in your life. So
it's true.
Well, we love you all. We hope that you had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday this past week. But we'll catch you next Friday. We got a good one with Pastor Scott. It's going to be great. Y'all have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening in with us today. We really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and you can also watch the video version of this on YouTube as well. All you have to do is search up the Pastor's Potluck Podcast. From all of us here, we want to say thank you, and we'll see you next week.